DESIblitz.com।
बेदिली के सूखे पत्तों में छुपी ये पत्थर दिल पीढ़ी है मेरी। ऊंच नीच की बेड़ियां पैरों में पहने चमकीले भूतों को पकड़ने की कोशिश में ये पेड़ मगर सूखता जा रहा है। आसमानों में मंडरा रहे हैं बादलों के झुंड।
Hope you all enjoyed the film. I'm sure you're all on a bit of a high after watching this vibrant, psychedelic, cult road movie. Let me introduce my guests for tonight. On my right, I'm joined by the award-winning director of M-Cream, Agne Singh. And on my left, I'm joined by Rudra Ghosh, who plays the character of Maggie. Before we get started, just want to give you a quick summary which will help you, the audience, when you address your questions to our two special guests. The film indeed is very thought-provoking, be it borderline controversial in some aspects. The film does represent the feelings, the struggles, the emotions of today's Indian youth. By tackling injustice, the film does highlight a sort of positive revolution. As the film progresses, it does explore the realities of rebellion and drugs as a means and a form of outlet. Now, some of you who've watched this film may feel that this movie may or should have a sequel to it because it leaves you wondering what will become of these four individuals. Beginning with Agne, from Madrid to London and now to Birmingham, how important are festivals like LIFF for a film like M-Cream?
I think that incredibly important, it's of paramount importance, and not just for films like M-Cream, but I think for all independent films of, whether it's in English or Hindi or regional films, because there's several reasons, but I think a lot of these films don't, obviously have the kind of visibility that a big film would have because, it's quite simply they just don't have that kind of money when it comes to the publicity and the advertising. And I think film festivals are great in creating an awareness about a type of film that might not even be mainstream to begin with. And also just, I think, a chance for filmmakers to travel and share the film like we're doing now with new and different audiences. And that in itself is so very special. And many of these films would probably never be seen, on the big screen in places like Birmingham or Madrid or London even, if it wasn't for the film festivals. So I think that they are of incredible importance, and thank you all so much for coming to show your support, and I really do hope that this initiative can really grow and strengthen in the years to come.
Oh, J. Meet Figs. Figs, J.
Interesting name.
Yeah, it's short for Figaro.
So, Figaro, what's your deal?
मुझे तो बस चरस से प्यार है.
Wow.
Continuing with the cream effect, growing up, Agne, what were you creaming into? Were you as rebellious as some of the characters? And to put you on the spot further, I want to ask you, have you ever taken hashish yourself?
Well, I guess I have to dignify that question with a response. I don't know, I think I would hope to believe that I was also rebellious and still am in some ways, but I think for me, the film is very much inspired by my own contemporaries. So a lot of people that I have known and know, and that's the real strength of the film, I think, is that it's so many real stories, and so many of the young people in India, but also I think pretty much across the world have really, inspired me, because even when I was back in university, I kind of had the vague ideas about this kind of film, and even when I was in high school, I'd heard about this mythical, magical hashish up there in the Himalayas somewhere. And I remember that all of us had a friend who had had ostensibly, made this trip in search of this magical drug. And as far as, the drugs go, yeah, I've dabbled a bit, I have to admit, but you don't hear that from me, and, well, I guess I mean, recorded, so can't deny it afterwards, but anyhow. But I think that the film, some people have said, I think we've got like both responses in the sense that some people are put off in the sense that they think the film is promoting drugs, and I really don't think that's necessarily the case. I think it's more just an exploration of what is going on, and I think the sooner we accept rather than shy away from the reality, we'd be able to grapple with it a lot better.
देख ले यार कुछ क्रीम हो तो cream भाईजी the best has in the world. One puff and nirvan.
Anyway, so where can we get some cream?
So there is a place way up in the hills. No official record of its existence. Not on the map. But the chosen few call it Ma Baba Jagal.
All four characters are quite rebellious in their own different ways. Maggie, you're quite rebellious in the film as well. Are you rebellious in real life too, and how?
Are you asking Maggie or are you asking Aritra?
Aritra.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, in many ways I'm rebellious. Not exactly like Maggie, but growing up, I'm very lucky to have parents who've allowed me to do what I want, to follow my dreams. So I've been able to question everything around me. I've been a pretty strong-headed person while growing up. I've always wanted to do what I wanted to do. So yeah, pretty rebellious in some ways.
Where did the title M Cream come from? What was the source of inspiration?
Right, so there is actually a village way up in the Himalayas, in the Parvati Valley, which is the infamous hash growing region. So there is a village actually called Mulana, which is a very, very ancient society. And in that village, you supposedly have the best type of hashish, the cream. So the drug that we have in the film is just, I think, it's a more mythological version of that, and also I think we changed a few of the names because I think they're still trying to keep these kind of places under wraps, because I mean they're obviously under the radar, and so we didn't want to give out too many of the names for that reason. But I think but there is actually a place somewhere, even though in this film a few of the names have been changed. Those places actually do exist, so I would encourage the more adventurous of you to actually undertake that journey yourselves at some point.
At the start of the film, there are some quite bold and adult scenes which you're featured in. Though it's quite norm to have these scenes in Indian cinema nowadays, but how comfortable were you doing these scenes?
When I read the script, I spoke with Agnya about it. We went through it lots of times. We talked about it, discussed it. And yeah, when it was time to shoot, you're an actor, you do it. But you have to be prepared for it, of course. And you have to know why you're doing it. You just don't walk in and do a scene like that. You obviously know why and the significance of it in the film, which you would have all realized. And then, when you do your homework and you know exactly what you have to do, you just go in there. This is true to the urban Indian youth, and whatever you see, like whether it's Maggie or Figs or Jay or Niz, they're all really straight out of they completely hit home. Like you know somebody like that. Like I know someone who is maybe not exactly Maggie or exactly Niz, but I know somebody who's some hybrid of that. Like every person, every individual, every character is very relatable, and that's how confused the youth is.
Earlier this year, we travelled in the sort of region in which the film was shot, in Journey to Shimla, and we were very much aware of enormous, quote, resorts all over the place in the middle of the countryside. Have there in reality been massive protests against these, or are they accepted as, quote, development?
Right, no, I think that's a very good question. There have been protests. In fact, this protest that you saw in the film is also inspired by a newspaper article that I'd read, where I'd heard about, because we had the Chipko. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Chipko movement, but it was basically like a tree hugging type of movement back in the 70s, which was very popular and effective in India. And there was actually a resort that was coming up, and I read about the villagers who had kind of embraced the Chipko tactics and were actually tying these rakis, as they termed them, around the trees. So there are protests. How effective they are, of course, I think, I think that we've all been kind of fed the developmental line, and it is kind of a shame, because I think India is a very different country. So if you say that development can only be the Western model, then all the forests should be cut down, and all the villages should be the villagers should be displaced, and so on and so forth. And a lot of people have bought into that argument, hook, line, and sinker, which I think is unfortunate. But I think that it's encouraging to see people still, against all odds, working for the environmental movement, working for the anti-corruption movement, and it's really the grassroots people who do it with no recognition, no money, usually putting their own, lives on the line, and at the end of the day get very little in return. But I think, hats off to them.
Besides your experiences with hashish, did you use any of your other experiences of life or personal experiences when writing this film?
Yeah, absolutely, I would say, and in many ways conscious and unconsciously so. As I said, people have actually come up to me and said, is it autobiographical? And in many ways it is, because, like I said, it's been inspired by my own contemporaries, my own peers, and by really what I see going on. And even in terms of the politics of it, I think that in the 60s and 70s we had a great degree of radicalism, which kind of disappeared and petered out as the 90s came around. And I, growing up in the 90s, I found that materialistic bubble to be quite stifling. And so what I've noticed in the last 10 years even, is this kind of resurgence of radicalism in many ways. In some ways it's different than how we had it in the 60s, and in some ways it's similar as well. And maybe these things do come in cycles, but I've seen it in India, and also the Arab Spring, the Occupy movement, so many protests here in the UK as well. And in some ways that it can be misguided at times, so I'm not saying that everything is hunky-dory about it, but I think that it's encouraging that young people are beginning to question the system, and I think that can only lead to positive change.
The cast is indeed very impressive. You even casted Tom Alter in this film, who is famously known for portraying the evil Angrez, the evil Englishman in classic Bollywood films. What was it like working with the veteran actors in this film?
Yeah, no, I think we were really blessed to have people like Tom Alter and Barry John and Dushan Dubey as well. Both Tom and Barry are really, they're veterans. They've been doing theatre and film for, decades and decades. And people ask me, how did you direct those guys? And I couldn't really have directed them much anyhow. And they didn't really need much direction, obviously. I think that for both of them, we wanted to involve them in the film. And, they very graciously accepted. And even though the roles are small, I think that, they add so much gravitas to the film. And, yeah, I think Tom is really one of the national treasures when it comes to Indian cinema, and to have him associated with this project, it was really, it was such a dream come true. And yeah, I think he's also a bit of the old school. I think he only got annoyed once because I think we were doing sync sound, and I think we would, when there was, I think he's very used to actually getting into the character. So there's a scene actually which isn't in this version, in the festival version, but basically he's having breakfast with his wife and his son, and he actually was eating, and so the sound recordist had an issue with the cutlery and what have you, and then he obviously got annoyed as the takes went on. But he was otherwise, he was actually a gentleman. That was, like, I think the one moment when he snapped at us and the whole crew was petrified. But both of them were real gentlemen, and it was just such an honor. And also, I should mention that the last film that Tom and Barry were in together was an Oscar winner, Gandhi in 1982, I believe. So we have something to live up to with this one.
Different, you and I.
You drunk already?
No. Well, maybe a little.
Imad Shah, who plays Figs in the film, is the son of legendary actor Nasiruddin Shah. Now, while he is aiming to create his own identity, but it's quite evident that there are some striking similarities between the father and son. Do you think Imad is following into the footsteps of his father in terms of the kind of cinema he's doing and the type of roles he's playing?
I would think so. I think that Nasir, in fact, got his start in cinema with films like Albert Pinto, Said Mirza's film, which was one of the most striking examples of Indian independent cinema in the 70s. And I think his whole family is very creative, and his mother as well is a very accomplished actress. So I think that in many ways they've always supported independent cinema. They've always supported, slightly riskier stories. In that sense, I do think that Imad is, obviously he's got a long way to go. He's got big shoes to fill. And also I think he's, there are similarities. And I think Imad really doesn't like being compared to his dad because everyone always keeps doing it. But there are definitely many similarities between them, and also, I think some differences as well. But I think that the core values that they share, and their commitment, of course, to the arts and to parallel cinema, is of course one and the same.
Coming back to Hash, I know you're going to hate me for this, but it needs to be asked. Drugs is cleverly used as a device in the film. Do you think the film is promoting drugs as a means of escapism, or was it to create a further debate about whether drugs such as cannabis should be legalized or not?
Yeah, I think that, well, for me the film is definitely not, it's definitely not a pro-drugs film. But that being said, I find myself on the back foot always when, I get approached with that question and, someone gets up and says, oh, I feel, this film is promoting drugs and we all know how bad drugs are. And I mean, the truth of the matter is, I think that there's a very big difference when you look at drugs. There's a very big difference between, drugs like marijuana and hashish and, drugs like heroin, for instance, and, clubbing them all together, to me doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I think that, at this point, I do want to say that, yes, we should start a debate on this. In fact, that's what they're doing in the United States and many other countries. And I think that, India, which actually has a very long history and tradition of using marijuana and hashish, particularly in religious ceremonies, and for literally hundreds and hundreds of years, I find it kind of hypocritical and silly that we have such a draconian approach to it when, in Western countries, finally it's being decriminalized, and people are having, debates about the medicinal value of marijuana and hashish and so on and so forth. And that being said, it is a reality. If you go to any college campus, anywhere in India, you will find kids experimenting with drugs. And I think that, we should be very, very clear with them also about that. And I mean, if you have stuff like cigarettes and alcohol legal, then I really don't see why, something like marijuana, something which is as harmless, is met with such a taboo attitude. That's just my 2 cents on it.
With anti-hash slogans in India, and as you suggested, draconian laws, how do you think the film will be perceived in India when it is released?
Well, we haven't had too many screenings in India to date. We've just had maybe 1 private screening and maybe a couple of festival screenings, like 1 or 2. And I found it very interesting because the young people who were in the audience really embraced it wholeheartedly. And I think with the older generation, it was a split. So I think the slightly older ones, perhaps, people who were young in the 60s and 70s, it resonated with them. But with a lot of people also, they couldn't get past the drugs, they couldn't get past seeing, young people doing these things, and they felt that, it was very hard for them to accept. So I'm sure we're going to have a bit of both. Internationally, people have said, how can you release this film in India? It's never going to get a censor certificate. It's, are you sure that you won't get death threats when you release this? And ridiculous things like that as well, which I don't think, obviously, I think that we have, even in this festival, there's so many provocative, and thank God that they're so provocative, these films, and thought-provoking. So I'm looking forward to it. I think that it's going to be a bit of both. But I think that if you're committed to a bold vision, then you're bound to alienate one segment of the audience or the other. I think that's one difference between independent films and out-and-out mainstream Bollywood films, is they try to cater to everyone. And for us, we know that we're bound to alienate one group or the other if we want to stay true and very true to a particular vision. So, I think that's just healthy, and I'm looking forward to that debate as well.
Without disrespecting any of the current cast, if you were to make Cream as a Hollywood movie, who would you cast and why?
Right, that's quite interesting. I think, Imad, a lot of people have actually come up to me and said that, that guy looks just like James Franco and acts just like James Franco. And so I think James Franco would be a good Hollywood substitute for Imad's character. And I think James Franco would probably do a good job as well. He's quite quirky. And I think for Jay, I don't know, maybe... Jay for me, maybe Liv Tyler, perhaps, very... serene and she's a very beautiful character in an unconventional way. Not to say that Liv Tyler is also unconventional. She's also very conventionally attractive, but you should probably move on. Maggie's character, maybe. I think yes. I can't even think of anyone, but if I had to, right? If I had to just, but if I had to throw out a name, maybe I know Sarah Michelle Gellar, because I thought Buffy was cool back in the day, and she's spunky, and she's got the Maggie energy. And for Niz, I'd probably just say Freddie Prinze Jr., because Sarah Michelle Gellar and Freddie Prinze Jr. together, and kind of the couples. Anyhow, I should stop now. So.
Finally, what message do you want people to take away from this film, and what message do you want to give to all the Cream generation out there?
Yeah, so for me, I hate the word message, actually, because, I don't really think of myself as someone to give a message, but if I had to, just for the sake of using that word, and lack of any other word, I would say, I think that just to, really wake up to the reality that you live in, and, I think little victories and big defeats. I think that when we look at the world around us, we have a defeatist attitude, maybe because, what can you do when you see all these monumental things going wrong in the world? Just reading the newspaper, looking at the news would, put anyone into a depressive mood and state of mind. So I think little victories and big defeats is a great motto. And just the fact that, even that little bit of difference does count, and in the long run, it does add up. And I think that if we just begin to actually shake ourselves up a little bit, like these two characters did by the end of the film, and we're forced to actually start thinking about things that normally they wouldn't really think about, I think that in itself is a really big step, and that's not so hard for us to achieve.
Right, can we have one final massive standing ovation for Team M Cream?
It's our annual moon rave tonight.
Moon rave? What's that?
You know, you created such a mess last night. And I was only trying to help you here.
Hi, my name's Jayashri Bose. That's Figs. We heard through a friend that you were in the area and about what's going on here, and we thought we could, well, volunteer.